The Baltimore Ravens cannot beat the Kansas City Chiefs. It's just a pure fact right now, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it, not the Baltimore Ravens, not their fans. And I'm sorry to tell you guys this, but it is not looking good for you guys against the Kansas City Chiefs. So, since Lamar Jackson has been the starting quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens, they are 0-3 against the Chiefs. They have not been able to win a single game. They've made most of them pretty close. This was probably like the worst, blowout, I'd say. It's not totally a blowout. It was a 14-point game. It's whatever you want to say. But this was probably the least close out of all the matchups between the Ravens and the Chiefs. And this is probably the one where Baltimore came in with the highest expectations. And, they were looked at as the best team in football. I called them the best team in football. And they came out and they looked like a subpar team compared to these Chiefs. So last night on Monday Night Football, the Baltimore Ravens lost 34-20 to the Kansas City Chiefs. And let's talk about Lamar Jackson for a second because I know that's what you guys want to hear about. The whole thing before the game was this QB matchup. You have Lamar Jackson, former MVP this last year, and then Patrick Mahomes, the MVP 2 years ago, and the Super Bowl MVP of last year. Lamar did not have an amazing game. Let's look at the stats here. He was 15 for 28 for 97 yards, and he did throw a touchdown, but he also, and he had 0 interceptions, but 15 for 28 for 97 yards. Clearly, that means he couldn't get down the field. And, he wasn't extremely accurate. 15 for 28, that's slightly above 50%. But it's not exactly what you want out of your star quarterback, right? And especially when you compare them to Mahomes' stats, which we'll get into later. He had a few bad passes, too, that should have or could have been picked off by the Chiefs' defenders. And I really think that it didn't look good for him last night. You look at the stats and you're like, well, he threw a touchdown. He had 0 interceptions. Maybe this was just a game where they didn't ask him to throw that much. And, they only asked him to throw 28 times, which is, a little below average, I'd say, for a starting quarterback, especially a quarterback of his prominence and his prestige. And yet, he did throw some really bad balls in this game, some that are just going to go down as incompletions that should have been interceptions. And I think that the Chiefs defense played well, but, he couldn't do anything. And he did shred him a little bit in the running game. I believe he averaged like over 9 yards per carry, and he was the leading rusher on the Ravens, but it wasn't amazing for him. Let's just say that. It wasn't the greatest performance, especially out of a guy who has been looked at as potentially a back-to-back MVP candidate this year. And I think this game will be looked at and will kind of take him out of contention for that. And it's not all on his back either. Let's make that clear. It wasn't all on his back because he had receivers who dropped the ball a lot. And I'm talking about Mark Andrews specifically. Mark Andrews is their primary receiving target. He's a tight end. And, they usually try to get him open in the middle of the field, just like Travis Kelce, for the Kansas City Chiefs. And sometimes he would thread the middle of the field, and sometimes he would find himself open on the sidelines. And, Lamar would make the right pass, and sometimes even in the end zone. And yet, Mark Andrews just let it slip out of his hands. Maybe it went off of his fingertips. Maybe he just couldn't make the catch. It was decent defense some of the time, but, those are balls that he should catch, especially being a tight end, being a bigger receiving threat than some of the guys he was matched up on. And I think he had the advantage for most of those matchups, and he let it slip away, and his hands are what really cost him any kind of significant yardage. And, we got to look at Mark Andrews. We got to look at Hollywood Brown and the rest of this receiving core for Baltimore and really wonder, what they need to do with that core because it looks like it needs a big star on it. It looks like they don't have a wide receiver one necessarily. And so they're going to have to make a play for him. There's been talks about Allen Robinson potentially being a target for the Baltimore Ravens. And I think if they manage to get Allen Robinson or anybody of his caliber, this team would look a lot more deadly. Lamar would have a favorite target to go to that isn't Mark Andrews. And I think that it would overall just help the confidence of the other guys who are getting thrown to a lot. And they're just like second, third receivers. They shouldn't be the primary targets. The running attack for the Ravens was solid, but it really took a long time to get going, I feel, especially in the first half. I mean, they couldn't really get any yards of offense at all, and it really just didn't look very good for them at all. And their offense was just kind of slow to get off the ground, and the passing game never really developed at all, but the rushing game really took until the second half to start going. Lamar had some good plays in the first half on his legs, but it really wasn't anything special, nothing that got them significant points. And so it really wasn't that good for Baltimore. The second half looked a lot more optimistic. They scored 10 more points, but it just never really developed on offense for them. Their defense, too, the most probably respected part of their game. You look at Lamar, you look at that offense, and you're like, they're really good. But the reason they're looked at as the best team in football is because of their defense. It's because it's a complete team. There are no holes. At least that's what we were saying. And their defense just could not keep up. Their all-pro cornerbacks could not keep up with the speed and route running of Kansas City wide receivers. Tyreek Hill, Sammy Watkins, McCole Hardman just got absolutely free for a touchdown pass from Patrick Mahomes. I mean, these guys were getting separation, and it did not look good, especially for one Marcus Peters, which, I could take my time to gloat about how Marcus Peters used to be on the Chiefs, and now he's getting cooked by the Chiefs wide receivers. But I'm not going to do that. I have more respect, more integrity, and more, um, you know, journalistic integrity than to make fun of Marcus Peters for that. But he did not look good. And Marlon Humphrey had some good plays throughout. But, it was just that the overall, I mean, the Ravens defense could not keep up. They threw so many different looks at Patrick Mahomes, and they seemed to just get picked apart on every single look that they threw at him. They would run a lot of blitzes on third downs, and Mahomes would somehow find a way to flip it to a guy on a screen or get outside the pocket and, run it a few yards on his legs, get out of bounds. He was just making the right plays, and his decision making was absolutely phenomenal in this game. And there was nothing that the Ravens could do to to counter it. Let's look at Mahomes' stats. He had himself a day, 31 for 42 passing for 382 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. And let's not forget that he had the first touchdown on the game on the ground. So, he rushed in for that touchdown, and he was untouched, not even close to being touched, running into the end zone. It was just a really good day for him, and it just makes me look with way more respect for him because, I have so much respect for Patrick Mahomes as somebody who's watched his every game, his every move, and yet still he somehow manages to amaze me every game. He looks so much better than he did, even in his MVP season. And I know the stats may not show that for this year, but his decision making was phenomenal. You look at that Chargers game and you kind of are left wondering because he had a lot of bad passes and he didn't always make the right decision. But this game, he was on his game, and I'm really proud of him for that. The Chiefs' defense actually started to step up, and they looked like they were in their postseason form of last year. It really took until about, week 11, I'd say, that they probably started to kind of gel. And yet, without some key pieces, the Chiefs managed to keep up, and they managed to stifle a team who has gone off in the first 2 weeks of the NFL season. And it looks like the Chiefs are the best defense that the Ravens have played so far. And so I got to give them nothing but props, man. It was really good to see that. My main thing is the Chiefs look so different from how they did in week 2, and it makes me wonder if they were overlooking the Chargers and kind of more focused on this game. It's really bad to do that sometimes, but they managed to escape with the win, and they got a huge win on Monday Night Football. So I can't fault them too much. The performance just does not reflect well on the Ravens and their postseason hopes. They're already known as a team who chokes in the postseason a little bit. They're not very good compared to their regular season, numbers. But, they really had a chance to show that they could hang with the top level teams. And they kind of failed here. And I'm kind of a little bit disappointed in a team that I was already anointing as the best team in the NFL. The Chiefs really should be favorites at this point to repeat in the Super Bowl and probably win it. I'm really happy about how things have gone for them the first 3 weeks. Week two was a little bit of a scare against the Chargers, but I'm going to give them a pass for that one because they faced a team with a completely new starting quarterback. They planned to play against Tyrod Taylor. They ended up playing against Justin Herbert, and they were looking a little bit forward to this game. Let's keep it real. They were looking forward to this game a little bit more than that game. So I got to give it to the Chiefs. I really think that it's their league to lose. And so I'm going to keep monitoring their progress, and I'll keep letting you know how those Chiefs look. We'll get to a little bit of Chiefs topics a little bit later in the video with the Q&A mailbag. But that's all I have for the Ravens and the Chiefs game, Monday Night Football. It was a great matchup. For being a game that wasn't exactly close most of it, I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a really fun game to watch, even if the Ravens weren't always putting up their best fight.